I'm on your page now.
Okay, it should come on in a second.
Okay.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Nurse Charms Live. I am your host, Nurse Charms, and we are live. Yes, tonight we're discussing all things politics. So if you're new to my show, the purpose of doing this show is to provide everyone with education about the presidential race. You know, we debate policies, but the most important thing is to encourage everyone to be an educated voter. Don't just give your vote away, right? Make sure that you understand who you're voting for. So with that being said, I'm just going to go ahead and introduce my guest. He's a familiar face. He's known as the voice of Detroit. He is a radio host on 9:10 a.m. You can catch him on Mondays, 7 p.m. No, I'm sorry. Mondays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m., 9:10 a.m. Superstation. You catch him live, watch his show. But tonight he's me, and I'm very excited. So, Brandon, how you doing tonight?
How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. I'm doing wonderful. So just go ahead and tell everyone a little bit about yourself and why you care about politics.
Well, it's funny, Charmaine. I mean, everyone should care about politics because it affects the way that we do everything that we do. I mean, from education to business to transportation and how we get from A to B. Those are all political decisions. And so I think that young people specifically have to be engaged because the things that happen in Washington, D.C., or the things that happen in Lansing or City Hall directly affect you.
Yeah, that's very important. So tell everybody what side of the political spectrum that you sit on.
Well,
Are you
I'll
left,
say this.
right, queen,
Well,
center?
I think there's so many issues now. I identify as a conservative, but I also think that there are so many issues right now, from education reform to healthcare, where and that's probably what I want to talk about today. Is we all need to be independent thinkers and independent minded. One of the challenges is that 44% of independents make up the electorate. And so when you look at the rising, folks are leaving the Republican Party and they're leaving the Democratic Party. And what they're doing, they're becoming independent, they're voting independent, they're thinking independently. And so I think the challenge is, how do we convince people? And you said it earlier, it's not enough to just give your vote away to a political party. It's important that we are aware of the issues and that we're voting on what makes sense, not what is the label of the party that you or your family identify with.
Yeah. So before we talk about this, because we're gonna talk about. I hear feedback. What's that?
I don't know.
Is that your? How did that start? Oh no, we can't be having feedback. Okay. We'll just keep going. If anyone's on the thread, let us know how we sound. Let me just make sure the comment feed is open. Okay, cool. So if you guys have any comments, please jump in, ask us any questions, and we'll make sure we get to them. But let us know that you can see us and hear us. Okay, someone let me know in the comment feed. Okay, but anyways, I wanted to get into, before we get into like this battle of the independent, independent voters. First, I want to talk about the cancel culture, because that thing is just like going crazy. Like, I'm seeing people put up statuses. If you're not voting for Biden, unfriend me now, or if you're voting for Trump, I don't, I'm deleting all the people talking about Trump. I mean, it's literally just so weird, right? And today I actually tried to go on to one of my Facebook friends page, and obviously I'm blocked because I can't see their page. And I know I post a lot, I post a lot about politics or whatever. I started real knee deep into politics because, I'm a registered nurse, and, my whole passion has been with this COVID. I've been doing lots of research with COVID, and, I've been doing my shows about COVID, but then I kind of transitioned into politics because we're like 50 days out now, and it's just so important to get, voter education out. So, and COVID was just becoming so politicized. So now I started getting into politics and stuff like that, and debating people over different issues. So it's just been crazy, but it's been great because I've been learning a lot myself, and I'm sure that a lot of people have been learning from me as well. But I know I talk about Trump, I talk about Biden. So obviously this person who, blocked me must have got offended by things I'm posting. And I know that he had recently put up something like, if you're not voting for Biden, unfriend me or whatever. And then I have a client who was just telling me about, him and his girlfriend were having a discussion about, politics. And he told her, like, look, vote for whoever, I don't care. But this whole cancel culture, if you're not voting for a certain it's almost like communism. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not what voting is about. You shouldn't feel pressure to vote for a certain candidate to stay friends with somebody. So what are your views on this whole notion of cancel culture? And it's really a lot of division within the Black community, because you see a lot of Black people torn, like they don't want to vote for Biden, but they don't want to vote for Trump either. So like they may default onto Biden, and they get angry because people don't want to vote for Biden. So let's just talk about that a little bit.
You know what? First of all, it comes down to maturity. The reality is this is a free country, and everyone deserves to not only have to vote and support for who they want, but the other big part of this is why privacy is so important. And as you can see, privacy is slowly leaving this country, this nation, our politics, our political system. But you said something that was really interesting that I want to get on. You said there are two candidates that the American people just aren't filling. And so that's why I say it's so important where political parties are really becoming a thing of the past, where these are the things that, when you talk about political machines, machines drive, they move at the rate of who's driving the vehicle, but they don't really talk about the issues that are affecting most Americans. And so some people have said that both parties, unfortunately, are out of touch when it comes to what is the everyday person in America dealing with. So when we talk about healthcare, when we talk about education, when we talk about transit issues, when we talk about the economy, these are the type of issues that when you say the cancel culture, there's something very wrong about the fact that, whether you agree with me or not, there still exists something called civility. And that civility is what we still need. And I'm going to tell you something, I'm seeing it slowly fade away. And to me, that's un-American. And so what makes America really great, in my opinion, is you can do what you want, say what you want, be who you want, and not be ridiculed for it. That's a free country.
Right. And I'm looking at you said something. You said we need independent candidates in American politics, starting with Detroit. So let's just kind of start the discussion off with that. I saw somebody had typed in on your status, like, let's have that discussion after the election or whatever. But but why is it important to have more independent candidates, and why is it hard for an independent candidate to win the presidency?
Well, because the reality is independent candidates can't get any funding. I mean, people go to political parties because they want to get the recognition, they want to get the money, they want to get funding, and they want to get campaign support. But the challenge is that, it's amazing when people don't know if a candidate is a Democrat, is a Republican, and they seriously pay attention to what is this person saying. People make more divested decisions and more important and strategic decisions when they're listening to the power of ideas and not the power of a political label. And I think the challenge is that's where we are today, where, no one should say, well, my grandparents voted this way, so I'm gonna vote this way. But what is the candidate saying?
Right.
Did he offer a solution to a problem? What is where are we in terms of understanding that, your value system, does it truly relate to this guy or this guy, or are you relying on a political label to make that decision for you? And I can tell you something. Every Democrat is not your friend, and every Republican is not your enemy. But going a step further, there are some. I tell people all day there are some candidates that make sense, regardless of which side of the aisle they're on, and then there's certain candidates that simply don't make sense, regardless of which. So we really have to listen to what our candidates saying. And the bottom line is, we talk about free market in our economic system, but we don't really talk about free market and the power of ideas in our political parties. And so I tell people every day, I typically vote for fiscal conservative candidates, but I'm a socially moderate. I'm a social moderate. So social issues, if they're not impacting people, I'm a big believer in privacy rights. That's important. I'm a big believer in the fact that a person should be able to make a decision based on what's in the best interest of them. And so the challenge with that is that we've got a situation where, I've listened to what people have said, and the reality is America's at a crossroads, because I've literally heard people say they're not feeling the guy on the left and they don't care for the guy on the right, but they're stuck when there are other candidates in the race. We have an independent candidate. We have a Green Party candidate. We have a working parties candidate, but you never hear about them. And you never hear about them because they can't raise the money.
So let's talk a little bit about what the independent party represents, what the Green Party represents. I mean, because I don't think people really know enough about it. They just know that, well, it's an alternate, but they really don't know what issues, especially with this election, because I know there's somebody, there's actually a Black woman. She's running for president. Her name is Jade, and she's running as independent. Kanye West, I shouldn't go there, but I heard he was still running, but I don't know. But anyways, I'm just like, what? Let's get stands for. What's the difference between independent, Republican, and Democrat?
Well, first of all, let's be clear on this. I think the question is, why are people running from these political establishments, and why are they trying to become independent all of a sudden? Republicans typically believe in less government. And so, like me, I believe in the power of the individual. Democrats want more government because they simply believe that, unfortunately, the private industry is not going to do right by people. In some cases, it is not. But the challenge is that, it's not just about being an independent, but it's about making sure that you're aware and you know why you're voting for someone. And so I tell people the first and most important thing is to go vote. But it's important to do your research. People talk about the libertarian movement. There's Joe Jorgensen, who's a woman running for that seat. And then you got Jade Simmons, who is an independent entrepreneur, who just said, you know what, I'm sick and tired of having to choose between these two political establishments. And so I think the challenge is it's how do we, it's something as simple as nonpartisan elections. Right now, we see it at the municipal level, but we don't see it at the state level. We don't see it at the federal level, and we don't see it at the county level. And I believe if we had nonpartisan elections, at least at the county and state level, you would see a different type of legislature. You would see one where people actually are there to do the work and not there to serve a political party's interests.
Right. And I saw a Gallup poll. It was from July, and it said that 40% people, because they were asking basically how do you identify, where you are on the political spectrum, and 40% identify as independent. 28% identified as Republican, and 29% identified as Democrat. So I thought that was interesting that so many people identify as independent. And, I just talked to people individually, like a lot of people who have come on my show, they've said that they were independent, and then depending on what the issue is, they either, lean more conservative or lean more liberal. So, is like the independent party becoming the next majority, the new majority? Like, do we actually have a chance? Because independent is not like it's a new party, you know what I'm saying? How much longer until we can actually become a majority, because every year candidates run, but we never, like you said, they don't have the money. I mean, are we getting closer to seeing finally a third option, or is it just always going to be the same thing?
So I think I wouldn't say it's a party. I think we need to get away from parties. I think it's a movement. And I think that the challenge is people are getting fed up about the fact that the political system isn't working for them. Doesn't matter if it's a Democrat, Republican. And I'll tell you, as someone who has worked for political politicians in the past, one of the things is that I can tell you all day that political parties, people go to them because they need them in order to get elected. But it should come down to the power of ideas. And I think, unfortunately, the power of ideas has taken a back seat to actually solving people's problems. And so that's why I always say, the best government is municipal government, because in municipal government, your political affiliation really doesn't matter. It comes down to solving problems and dealing directly with people. And that's how we solve America's problems. It's not winning the primary on a Republican side or winning, the general on a Democratic side, because parties, essentially, people are fed up with parties. I can tell you cities like Detroit, Baltimore, New Orleans, Los Angeles, cities that have some very serious issues. I won't get into the conversation of who's there, but the reality is political machines have run these cities. And the challenge is that those machines have forgot about the most important thing, the people. So I think it's important that when we talk about this movement, that we make sure that people are the priority when it comes to politics, not political establishments.
Right. So, I referenced that poll and how we have so many independent people, belonging to independents. So which way do you think they're going to lean? Like, do independents voters is it a possibility that they can sway the election either way, since it's so many? I mean, because at the end of the day, I mean, yeah, there's another option. You could always vote independent. You don't have to vote Democrat or Republican, but I mean, some independents are gonna choose either or. So how do you think
I won't say who will win the election, because I'll be honest with you, I don't know. But I will say, I think people are going to vote pocketbook issues. They're not going to worry about what's happening in, UAE and the Iran deal. That doesn't directly affect people. They're going to worry about, is the economy getting better via COVID? They're going to worry about, do I have access to health care? The fact that COVID, unfortunately, took a lot of lives this year. Those are going to be the issue. So I think the debates coming up for the two candidates that we have, I think that's going to be a big issue, is which candidate is going to speak to what people's pocketbook issues are. But the other problem is, and I actually posted this on Facebook one time, and I said, it's sad that you have over 15 political candidates for the office of president, yet the American people are only presented with 2. Think about that for a minute. So those folks, they don't get a shot to be on stage, on a national stage.
Right. Why not?
That's the $1 million question.
I mean, just what would just be your thoughts? Why?
I mean, with Eisenhower, who was a Republican president, but he was actually one of my favorites. He said it very simple: we got to get the money out of politics. It's too much money in the political systems, where it has slowly become less about serving people and more about serving special interest groups. That's where we are.
And then there's also this notion that, if you vote independent, you're going to take away votes from Biden. I put something up about Jade, and oh my gosh, that thing just got hundreds and hundreds of comments. I was just basically putting the education out there, like, here's another option, besides Trump and Biden. And a lot of hardcore Democrats, they were just on so hard, like, this is a wasted vote, and why are you voting for her? Is just going to take away from Biden. I mean, people were really upset. So can you just break that down, and maybe even the electoral college process, just so people can kind of understand, how their votes count. And because people, I mean, do you believe that voting independent will take away a vote from another party? You want to just get into that a little
First of
bit?
all, I think every vote counts. I think we got to be very careful, because my thing is, if it takes votes away from your candidate, then maybe your candidate is not as strong as you think they are. But, I mean, just being honest.
Right.
But the other part of that is, I think this is why it goes back to getting, the nonpartisan question. Should elections be nonpartisan? I think they should be. I mean, the reality is, some people literally, I deal with a lot of people on both sides, and some people literally have told me they're supporting a candidate on the left and on the right, and they do not understand or know anything that the candidate is saying or offering, but they're getting ready to cast their vote to a man or woman that they know nothing about. That's where we are. And then they wonder why streets don't get fixed, why schools don't get better, why people don't get access to quality health care. They wonder why people don't have transit to get to work. And so that's why it's important that, we've got to get serious about pressing this. And I won't even call it a party. I think we should be done with parties, with this independent movement in American cities specifically, to say, if your city or your council person or your state rep or your congresswoman or congressman is not representing you, you need to get rid of them.
Right. So I know I'm probably sounding redundant, but how can we make this work? Because I mean, I see people talking about it, on social media all the time. We need to form a new party. There's always a lot of discussions and always a lot of talk. But like you said, we got to get money. But I mean, like, what are some steps that can be done and, make some progress, or basically nothing until we get the funding?
So the two most important things is in politics is money and people. If you ain't got the money, you got to organize. So you got to do a little groundwork. But part of that is, you don't organize during an election, you organize during the off season. And so it's important to hold your elected official accountable. And so if that means don't complain, but go visit them. Your council person, your state rep, your congressperson, they should know who you are if you're passionate about an issue. The other thing is that, hold town halls and make sure that they actually come. Not that they send a representative, that they come, because they didn't send a representative when they came and asked for your vote. So when it comes to solving the issues, you need to have direct contact with them. And then last, it's important that when we talk about what is, how is an elected official, are they leaving their district better after they get it versus before they had it? And that's a real question. People need to be held accountable, bottom line. And I think that's why so many people have said, we need to look at this independent movement in America to go with the best candidate, despite what my family's voting history is, because people are fed up. COVID, God forbid, took a whammy on so many cities, major cities, Detroit specifically. And so I think the challenge is that COVID was the catalyst where I think a lot of people start waking up and start saying, we've got a problem in this country. We've got a problem in this country if we're talking about, failed education structures, 30, 40 years failure. If we're talking about transit that still doesn't go past 2.6 miles, if we're talking about the fact that, people had to die because they didn't have access to quality health care. These are real issues.
Right. So wait, circle back a little bit when we were just talking about explain how the electoral college works, because the people say we got to vote Trump out. I'm talking about all the people who just do not like Trump, and they're like, we got to vote Trump out. Like, is that even a real thing? Like, I don't know where people are getting that from. Like, we got to vote Trump out. Like, how do you vote somebody out? What does that mean?
Groupthink is a very dangerous thing. And the president has done some things that I don't agree with. He's done some things I like. But on the other side, Democrats have supported things in the past that I agree with. and supported some things that I don't like. I think the challenge, though, is for every person that says that, I challenge them. Why? It's not enough to just say you don't like something. People fear what they don't know. Why? And if you got a substantial reason, so be it. But you got a reason not to. And then on the flip side, I also challenge people to say if they support a candidate. Well,
they say the reason is because he's racist. Oh, or he said grab him by the P, or what he said about it's just all little different reasons. That those are kind of like sound bites that you hear from CNN. I never really hear someone say, well, his policy affected my business. His policy affected, my family member in the hospital trying to get health care. I never hear those discussions. I just always hear rumors. So I'm asking, like, what is the reason why? What did he specifically do to you? Or is it just because of all this?
The media has played a big role in all of this. I mean, the media is powerful. And so I think that, there have been some things that have been said that I didn't like from both candidates. I didn't like this rumored comment that the president made about rumor, because I didn't hear him say it, if it was true about veterans. My grandfather was a veteran. Both my grandfathers were veterans. And every veteran in this country is a hero, regardless of who they are. But on the flip side, I didn't like Joe Biden's comment when he said, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. Really?
Yeah.
So the challenge is I think this is why this independent movement is so important in these American cities, because folks are tired of the same old political game that's being run, and they want something new. They want something, they actually want their issues to be resolved.
Right. Yeah, let's hop over here real quick to the comments and just see what a few people are saying here. Dennis says he's been making six figures for years, but the killing of unarmed Black people is a big issue to me. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, everything is not about my pocket. Let's just get into this because there is a perception that police are killing all the Black people, but the statistics show something different. Mm-hmm. So let's just talk about that.
So police brutality is unacceptable. As a Black man, I shouldn't have to worry about walking down the street in a neighborhood that the majority of folks that live there may not look like me, and to be harassed by the police. But the other side to that is, I'm going to disagree with what the guy wrote, because police brutality, to an extent, it is a pocketbook issue, because the reality is many of these men who have lost their lives, whether we're talking about Malice Green in Detroit, or George Floyd, or Audrey Aubrey, when we talk about the issues of poverty in America, it's not necessarily wealthy Black men that are being harassed by the police. It's Black men who live in certain neighborhoods who are targeted. That's the issue that we're talking about here. And so to me, it's an issue where how do we, one, get more African Americans in law enforcement to become police chiefs, to become county sheriffs, so that we can be there to make some of the decisions when these decisions are going down, or when it's to counter certain challenges in our law enforcement, in our judicial system, which historically has not necessarily been for us. Just if we're going to be honest with ourselves. But the other part of that is it's holding folks accountable. And so, I always say, I remember the incident in Detroit where the two men were walking, and there was an issue where the gentleman pulled out a firearm. To me, that's unacceptable. And so I always say, as a son of two parents who were law enforcement, policing and community policing programs are so important, because when you have police officers who don't live in the district, which is a problem, when they come into these cities, there's no connection there. There's no relationship there. And so that's why programs like PAL and programs like Cops and Kids in New York are so important, because they build relationships so we can avoid some of those tragedies that we've seen between the police and the community.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you on accountability. I feel like be a law-abiding citizen. You know, a lot of these situations we really don't hear the full story. I remember something had went on, and like all the activist groups, they went and immediately responded, and then Chief Craig came out with the tape, and it ended
Right.
up being, I hate to say this, justified killing, because I mean, I feel like nobody should be getting killed, but I mean, you know, they have to protect themselves, you know, the cops, you know, especially if you're shooting at the cops. So I remember everybody got upset, and then they went down there, then it ended up being, you know, the guy shot first. But I'm just saying, like, you know, rest in peace, of course, but I'm just saying, like, you know, don't do those things, and then, you know, you may not have any issues, right? I don't know. But I know I've got pulled over a couple of times by the police, but I didn't feel like I was being targeted. One time it was the snow. I was upset, but I don't think I was targeted. I was driving slow because it was the snow and slushy, and I didn't want to crash. And so the police pulled me over, and I'm like, "Why are you pulling me over?" He's like, "You're driving too slow." I'm like, you know, it is slippery out here. And so, you know, he asked me, was I drinking and stuff? And I mean, I guess that could have been, but I mean, I don't know. I didn't really, I mean, it was fine. And then another time, it was the same thing, but I was sleepy. It was a long day. So I was just driving slower because I was just so tired. Then the cops wanted to ask me, you know, was I drinking and stuff like that? And I'm like, dude, are you serious? I'm a freaking nurse. I will be the main one to know not to drink and drive.
Right.
Not saying all nurses are perfect, but you know, I was just like a little bit pissed off that. So I mean, those are situations, you know, where I'm sure the average person would have been like, nah, skip that. You know, that's, you know, intimidation and stuff like that. I didn't really take it like that. I mean, I don't know. But let me hop back over here because we got a lot of comments. I don't want to think anybody thinks that I'm not paying attention to them. Hold on, let me see. He says, take away all the lobbyists on both sides. I think he's
I
talking
couldn't,
about
I
when we were
couldn't, yep. I couldn't agree even
you
more.
agree
I
with
mean, I think the fact that, one of the things is most people don't know this, but when you're a state rep with a 2-year term, literally the minute you get elected, the next day you're raising money. So if you're raising money, how do you have time to legislate and focus on issues that affect the people? So the point is that I not only agree with getting rid of the lobbyists on both sides, but it goes back to this conversation of getting the big money out of government. That's the issue.
Yeah. But I like lobbyists because I've been up to Michigan, and because of the lobbyists, they, you know, I'm also a massage therapist. They've helped to change things. You know, we have a massage therapist lobbyist, you know, up there in Lansing, you know, all the time. So I mean, I don't know. Let's see. Somebody else has a comment. Dennis says we more activist intellectuals, true agents of change need to be in places like Kenosha, Minnesota. Many of our Black intellectuals model themselves after the scholarship of W. Du Bois, then the mass organizer Marcus Garvey.
Well, it
Any
comes
you
down.
got
So not only I'm going to respond to this. So not only, and I think there's the beautiful thing about this nation is people should be allowed to think what they want, regardless of how bad or how crazy or how ironic it sounds. That's called freedom. And so I think that
right,
whether if a black person wants to vote Republican, they let them. They should. If they want to vote liberal, want to vote for a Democrat, let them. They should. The main thing I'm advocating for is that you're educated about why you're voting for them. That's what's important here.
right,
And I can tell you that's not the
right,
case. The two are not mutually exclusive.
right. Dennis, Black people's problems have been here, whether a Democrat or Republican been in the White House. Yeah, I would
I
agree with
agree.
that.
Well, not only do I agree,
Uh,
but one of the things that King advocated for that he doesn't really get a lot of credit for is people are so held up on the civil rights conversation that a whole lot of folks forgot about the economic justice portion of his speeches. People don't talk about that. And so when we talk about the fact that, in a place like Detroit or Baltimore, The question should be, how many of those African-American contractors are actually getting subcontract agreements, or are they left out? Have they dealt with the issue of bonding? Have they dealt with the issue of collateral? Have they dealt with the issue that some of these business owners can't even get loans? Those are real issues. And so I think that when we talk about,
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say,
go ahead.
So I think when we talk about economic justice, the only city that I've seen that, in my opinion, got it right was Atlanta. And that's because they had a mayor, my favorite, Maynard Jackson, who was a visionary that said, if it's not about education or economic empowerment or transportation, it's not a priority. And I think that it's that mindset that says, when it comes down to it, what are the top 3 issues in the Black community? And it's 1, education, 2, economic empowerment, and making sure that we're at the table, and 3, transit. We got to get to work.
Right. I think Damon just has some jokes. I'm gonna bypass this one. I think you got to prove he must be referring to Biden's comment. But to talk about economics, yeah, you're right. I just heard that beginning October 1st, they're gonna in order to get a SBA loan, they're gonna be going by like your business FICO score. So that's going to make it, a little bit more difficult because some businesses may not have established credit, or their business credit may not be good. So, that goes back to the I can't think of the word right now, but it just basically just makes it harder, especially for Black business owners, to get credit. Let's see. More comments here. Thank you, Anthony. He says where you live if you're in Detroit. Yes, that needs to be a prerequisite because right now their rates are not good. I don't want to quote it because I don't know. I just know it's low. I saw them report the numbers of police officers who, do you know the number of the police officers who actually live in Detroit? I just know it's low. I remember Chief Craig saying it in a press.
I'll tell you exactly what it was. I just had him on my show. It's less than 30%. And probably less.
That's
but the reality is, that's not just important from the perspective of having some skin in the game, the fact that officers live in your neighborhood, but also it's an economic issue because now we're talking about a tax base. The fact that you're collecting a city check, but you're living in the suburbs. Think about that for a minute.
Right. Yeah, what sense does that make, right? We got another comment here. He said, city neighborhoods are over-policed and racially profiled has been a long time legitimate tactic used by countless departments. So would you agree with that?
Well, I think the over-policed, I mean, unfortunately, bad neighborhoods are going to be over-policed. The challenge is, how do we define bad neighborhoods? And so I always say there's rundown neighborhoods and then there's just bad. I grew up in a rundown neighborhood. I didn't grow up in a bad neighborhood. So we had a lot of old people on the block. We had a lot of kids on the block. We had a lot of families. But, the housing may not have been the greatest. The schools may not have been the greatest, but that doesn't make it a bad neighborhood. And so I think the challenge is it's not only, that's why it's so important to get more people who are more diversity in some of these law enforcement agencies so they understand the communities that they serve. Pookie on the street to you and I is just Pookie on the street. He's not a threat. But to someone who may come from the suburbs or may come from Wall Lake, they may not know that. And so it's literally issues like that of how do we address this issue around over policing.
Right. So let's just talk about, again, the whole purpose of this show, voter education, getting out the vote. Why is it so important to vote? I mean, the obvious, but I mean, just trying to really drive home, because a lot of people still think that their vote doesn't count. You know what I'm saying? People just, I ain't voting. My one little vote won't mean anything. So
Right.
let's just talk about just, why your one little vote means a lot.
Well, your vote means a lot, as well as everyone in your household's vote means a lot. And so I think the challenge with us is that, voting shouldn't just be about you. Voting should be about everybody in your household, everybody on your block, everybody at your job, because it's that important. But just as important, I won't say more important, just as important is knowing who you're voting for and why. And I think that's been our biggest issue is it should almost be illegal to tell someone who to vote for. I think it should be illegal because the reality is a person should have the right to do their own research, to do their own homework, and vote for people who they want, not who they're being told to vote or support.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, voting, like, I don't care about your personal life. I don't care about who, you cheated on or how many wives you have, or like, I really don't even care about any of that stuff. I just want to vote for somebody who's going to get a job. I want your policies to affect me positively. You know what I'm saying? So, like, I don't know. I just hear a lot of stuff that really doesn't care. Like, I don't care about that. Like, what somebody said, like, I really don't care. Just who is gonna do a better job at running the economy. So that's what I look at. I mean, and neither candidate is gonna be perfect, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, we're not in a perfect world. Everybody has their issues. I feel like both parties can do a better job at recruiting better candidates. I mean, for instance, the Democrats, what was it, over 20 candidates? None of those candidates were good enough. You know what I'm saying? Like, I do not like Biden. I'm just gonna put it out there. People probably already know. I mean, I'm not trying to bash him and tell people whatever, but I'm just saying I just don't like his political views. And I just feel like out of all, there were some better candidates, but I'm just saying, like, we got to hold these parties, even with the Republicans, we got to hold these parties, accountable. We got to try to, get funding and stuff behind the independent party. But, for right now, we got to hold these parties accountable. Like, y'all got to start giving us some better choices. You know what I'm saying? Because, I mean, you got these celebrities out here saying, well, Diddy was saying, what was he saying? He was saying, reparations or no vote. And then Ice Cube was saying, I'm not voting unless we get something for our vote. So, we got these campaigns and stuff out here. And so, Biden's campaign, he got worried because that, like, I put that out like a week ago. And then literally that same day, Biden's must have called Ice Cube and they had a meeting. I haven't seen Ice Cube post none of that since. But before that, he was just like going hard, and I haven't seen him. So it's like, they reaching out to these people that like, yo, you can't be out here telling folks don't vote or whatever. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what's going on. Have you heard any of that?
Here's the better conversation. Both Ice Cube and Puffy Combs have financial resources to change blocks, neighborhoods, communities. So my challenge is, I understand the conversation they want to have with Joe Biden and Donald Trump, but I put the ball back in their court, and maybe they're doing it. But it's important that politics can only go so far. I think our challenge is we don't have the resources, the fiscal resources, to change these neighborhoods. And so my things are, and I think one good example of somebody who is doing good work is LeBron James. He's putting his money where his mouth is. And so rather than, create a publicity stunt of what these two men are doing around, vote or die or any of these great campaigns, I'm thinking, let's put our money together and buy up the block. Let's change neighborhoods. Let's put a Starbucks in here that's Black owned. Let's go real revolutionary if we're talking about changing neighborhoods that are in economic distress. That's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about policies in Washington. We're talking about the abandoned building down the street. That's what we're talking about here.
Right. Let me hop here to these comments real quick. Thank y'all. I really appreciate y'all engaged tonight. Daryl says, I never want to sound political, but let's sound reasonable. I think education is very important. What can we do to get more people educated? That's why I'm having this show. So many people are trending the votes instead of being educated on how to vote. And yeah, that's saying, Brandon, is more important to know, who you voting for, what their policies are, right? You would agree with him.
I would agree with him, but
Right.
his quick question on education. I want to talk on that real quick.
Okay.
Education has changed in America. The 9 to 5 in America, to an extent, is dead, or the 9 to 3. And so when we talk about education, we got to talk about global education. We got to talk about the type of education that addresses the issues for some of our brothers and sisters that may not choose to go to a 4-year college or go to the armed services. So trade schools really become the necessary conversation when we're talking about the fact that, Detroit is the home of organized labor. Yet we still are having problems getting minorities and people of color in the labor unions, leading the labor unions, and so in the skilled trades. And so the challenge is, when we talk about when we have the conversation on trade schools as an alternative, I always say, the fact that we have 67,000 students in DPSCD, Detroit Public Schools. We've got about 30 to 40 public schools. Even we got a couple charter schools in there as well. But we only have 2 trade schools. And the reality is we've got to face the fact that everybody's not going to college and everybody's not going to the military armed services. So to me, we've got to get serious about this skilled trade conversation. There are some people that have said, hey, skilled trades is almost a better deal because it's no debt. And that is the issue that our people face is when you're in 100,000 plus of debt, it's got to be paid. And if you don't have the type of career that's going to pay it, now you're in a conundrum.
Right. And my thing has always been like, I understand welfare and all that stuff, but I just feel like it's keeping people down. You know what I'm saying? Like you paying people to stay home, giving people food stamps, Section 8, all of this stuff. Why not use that money to help, like you said, these trades to help better themselves so they can get a better job? Of course, they can go out, get a McDonald's job or whatever, but help them get better skills, so they can eventually get off of these programs. You know what I'm saying? Who wants to sit? Well, I don't want to say who wants to sit, but you can be more productive. You know what I'm saying? Working a more fulfilling job. I'm trying to be politically correct. I don't know. But, just working something where, you feel more fulfilled, you feel more challenged, you're making more money. Like, wouldn't that be a better thing to do with, with the government assistance money?
You're talking about a job versus a career. And I think, unfortunately, people have adopted and substituted the career for the job. And so they're doing jobs just to get by, but they're not actually fulfilled and they're not actually doing something in many cases that they love. And so that's a problem. But that comes down to, has our leadership stressed the importance of getting more diversity in the skilled trades, which I always say, these cities, when you talk about Detroit, Baltimore, New Orleans, Newark, New Jersey, the question needs to be, how do we return back to America's middle class? That's the conversation we're talking about. And so when we talk about that, we're saying it's skilled trade jobs that are going to get us there. It's making sure that kids have access to quality education and that parents have school choice where they can choose what's in the best interest for their children, not the government. Those are the types of conversations that we need to have if we're going to talk about bringing America's middle class back.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh. Okay, so comments are off the chain. Let me get in here real quick. Alicia says, I don't think it's policing. I think the problem is criminality, and that's the reality we don't want to talk about. Cops show up when called, not because they want to harass people. Would you agree with that?
That's a tricky one. I agree that when we talk about crime, people commit crimes and they need to be punished. But here's the catch. The question we need to be asking is, why do people commit crimes? You know why they commit crimes? because the quality of education in that community is probably not up to snuff. The opportunity for jobs, they're probably not reaching out to those folks. The transit part,
Right.
they can't get to work because they can't get across town. People have to survive. And so the reality is
Right.
we can talk about an issue or we can solve the problem. And solving the problem is to say, when we don't address these issues, we indirectly create criminals. That's the issue, because you got to
Right.
survive.
Oh my gosh, you hit it on the nail. Yes, that is so important. Those are the underlying issues. Like I'm a big person. Is we got to drill down. Let's drill down why this stuff is happening. Every time you keep drilling, you come up with the underlying reason, and that's how you have to fix the problem. Daryl says, why are churches not educating, or schools that hold majority of the people? Why are churches not educating?
So I'm gonna take a stab at this. I am a preacher's kid, a minister's kid. So I grew up in the church. I cannot stand to see another $1 million church in $100 neighborhood. And the challenge is that, churches at one time were the pinnacle of community involvement, community development. And so I think churches have to play a much greater role, not just in delivering the sermon, but in making sure that, maybe churches need to be in the real estate business. Maybe they need to be in the education business. Maybe they need to be in the community development and getting people the soft skills needed to get back to work business. Churches should be faith-based institutions should be a direct partner when it comes to bringing back cities. But let me also say this. This is an important topic because this gets into the role of faith. And I think the challenge is that, even Jesus, there's a story in the Bible where Jesus talks about his disciples asked him, should we minister to the people? And the first thing Jesus said was, have they had drink and have they eaten? Because he understood if your primary needs are not met, you ain't trying to hear a sermon.
Right. Yeah. Hold on, let me try to get to some more of these comments. Running out of time. Alicia, also, I don't think one needs to live in the community I serve. As a teacher, when I taught outside of Detroit, I drove from the suburbs. My house location shouldn't be a prerequisite to serve any community. What you think about that?
This has been an interesting topic because I think you do get a more diverse base when you open it up to people who live outside the city. The challenge is, as I said before, Detroit's got to find a tax base. And so I think if we're not going to bring in the residency law, which I support, which essentially says, whether you should own a property, you should own a residency, or you should own a business in the city, if you're talking about collecting a city check. But if we're not going to go with that direction, then the next topic has to be, how do we get creative about incentives, tax incentives? And so I think one of the things is, whether you support, legalizing, cannabis or not, it's revenue building. And so when we talk about holding entities accountable, looking at the cannabis industry as a tax base, as a revenue base for the city, looking at holding casinos accountable, who, the amount of funding that does not necessarily go into the city should. Casinos, and I've heard casinos in some cases make $1 million a day. You're talking about we can't use that to put that towards schools and redeveloping crumbling infrastructure. Come on. So I think that if we're not going to hold folks accountable to stay in the city, then the city better get creative about what alternative measures are they going to take to bring in more revenue to the city. And that takes creativity.
Yeah. Daryl just says, excellent job with addressing the issues. Alicia says, great discussion. Trump just put out a huge investment in trade schools. Not everyone will go to a 4-year. Did you hear any news on that?
I did. And that's a smart move. We can talk about where we want to be, or we can talk about where we are. And the challenge is, where we want to be isn't always necessarily where we are. And so, I think, as an HBCU grad, I always say, not only should we talk about, Detroit's a 75% African-American city. So not only should we talk about four-year colleges and community colleges, but we should talk about Black colleges having a much greater impact on the city of Detroit and the city of Baltimore and the city of New Orleans, etc. But then also trade schools and the skilled trades needs to be a second conversation if we're not talking about joining the military armed services or going to a four-year institution.
Right. Let's see. Damon just says facts. Daryl says I really like him. Levon says there's nothing wrong with food stamps and aid. What's wrong is it's built the wrong way. What
I
does
agree.
she mean?
Look,
Levon,
I have family members who grew up on food stamps. The challenge is food stamps shouldn't be a regular. It shouldn't be it shouldn't be a long-term issue. It should be a short-term sustainable fix. And so the challenge is we all go through hard times. I've gone through hard times. Certain members of my family have gone through hard times. But you shouldn't stay at food stamps. And so we've got to create a solution that gets people back to work.
Yeah. Right. So I mean, that's why I was trying to tread lightly and say it politically correct. But yeah, that's what I meant. I mean, it has to be some long-term solution. You can't just, for the rest of your life. Do you believe systematic racism still exists? Some Black people think we made it in America.
We've come a long way, but we haven't come far enough. And the reality is, and I always say this, and I am conservative, but we live in a situation where there's two sets of rules. But I wouldn't necessarily just base it on race. I think economics plays a big part in that. We're talking not about black, white. We're talking about the haves versus the have-nots. And unfortunately, when you have money, you play by a different set of rules in America than you do when you don't. And so I think that's the challenge, is that we really have to understand the economic conversation in America, not just the political one.
Let's see. Daryl says, exactly, make them educate themselves of a bad situation. I think he's referring to just like people being on welfare. Let me see. Damon says they could afford to create more trade program, but the corporate overlords would have to give up their welfare and tax incentives and wouldn't be able to pay slave wages to their workforce. Walmart. You agree with that?
Listen, I'm not gonna get into that.
I don't know.
I just think
tonight. I know, right?
I just think the trade conversation is important. The skilled trades, but not just the skilled trades. Getting more people in healthcare, in aviation, which there's a shortage of Black pilots. We need more African American faces in different places.
True. Artesia, she says she agrees. She says, when I was a child, you had community centers. These centers kept kids out of the streets. Now you have more police and no community centers. Defund the police sounds bad, but how do we reallocate the funds without creating a huge deficit? She's right.
She's absolutely right. But not only do we need more community centers, I agree, but we need more community workforce programs that allow kids to start thinking about their careers as early as 13 and 14 years old. And so imagine if we had a program that allowed a kid that if he had an interest to work for the police, at 14, he could go shadow and actually intern. So I'm a big believer of mentorship programs, intern programs, and co-op programs. Not only is it important to start having that conversation, but when a kid has hope, they don't sell dope. And that's the reality.
Oh, I like that. That's good. Alicia, she says exactly, but those excuses or reasons doesn't mean police are over policing. That's the argument. The argument over policing. They're doing their job. My stance is we focus on the issue: fatherless homes, godless homes, poor education, and an over dependency on welfare. Well, yeah,
she's right.
Those are some true Republican. Yeah,
she's right.
Yeah,
that's why
I love her.
But that's why leadership becomes so important, because the reality is we need more fathers. We need more fathers, and we need more mentors. And and we need
Yep.
more father figures. And I always say, programs like, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and all these after school programs, we need them more in the neighborhoods. We need those partnerships. We need PAL. If Ice Cube and Diddy want to talk about vote or die, they could really give Snoop Dogg a call, because what he's done, he's taken his time to start little league programs in South Central LA. Those things matter.
Right. Let's see. We got another comment. Majority of welfare is used by conservatives, whites in rural areas of America. Stop equating well to the Black welfare queen myth. Black women particularly are the fastest growing entrepreneur. Yes, that's true about Black women, but that opinion when he talks about this welfare is by conservatives, whites in rural areas. I don't know. Do you have any stats on that?
I don't have stats on that, but there are poor whites and there are poor blacks. And the reality is the welfare system in America is broken. The reality is, welfare is a program that was not meant to be a long-term program. It was meant to be a short-term fix. I think it goes back to creating an opportunity that gives people a plan. Kids don't need just plans. Adults need plans too. And so I think we've got to get serious, and that's where government, that's where leadership comes from, is addressing how do we fix people's problems as opposed to just promote campaign slogans.
Right. So true. Listen, we are running out of time here. Go ahead and give everyone your final thoughts on voting.
Folks, and I want to specifically speak to the people out there. When you vote, make sure that you're voting for something that matters, whether it's for you, for your community, or for your overall nation. The challenge is we hear a lot of what the media is saying. We hear a lot of noise, and we got a whole lot of people talking, but very few people are actually giving you a reason why and who you should vote for. So I tell people, make sure you vote, make sure your household votes, but more importantly, make sure you know what you're voting for. And I think that is how we make this nation and this country better off than it was 4 years ago.
Right. Well, listen, you have been such an amazing guest, a wealth of knowledge. I'm so honored that you made time to come on my show tonight. I would love to do this again. I would love to come on your show as well. But just thank you so much, Brandon. I really appreciate you. Thank you to everyone on the thread tonight for joining in, asking some very intelligent. I love to have this intellectual, dialogue. I do it all day, every day on my Facebook page. But thank you to everyone for, sharing your thoughts and watching us live tonight. And that's it. That's the wrap. Good night, everybody. Thank you, Brandon.